Topic number three, electric vehicles, right? Kind of continuation of this macro theme in the markets. It's permeating pretty much most businesses, just as the technology and cleaner energy macro shifts are happening as well. GM is planning to spend another 35 billion US dollars on electric vehicles and autonomous vehicles through 2025. And this is a second boost in the last few months, 30% higher than their November numbers. They have two new battery factories they're building in Ohio and Tennessee, and they raised their guidance to pre-tax profit to about $8.5 to $9.5 billion from $5.5 billion. So they're definitely expecting a windfall from this. It's definitely an investment for them. They're making kind of big plays. And overall, spending on car companies and electric vehicles has surged 41% across the board. So as I've said before, as I've been saying, this is a macro trend. This is here to stay. This isn't just passing. It was, I'd say maybe 5 years ago, it was kind of, just, it was an idea, but now it's people are investing. Like it's very concrete. People see the value. And even though in electric vehicles, they only account for about 5% of auto sales across Europe, China, and the US right now. So it's still very small. And that's where these companies see the potential because it's an untapped market. If they can get there first and they can get people coming to them, they're going to make a lot of profit. They're going to be in a good position. This could be an interesting way that some of these old auto companies that have really had stagnating inventory and not a lot of profit, not a very big profit margin, and just kind of sitting there. This could be a way for them to actually get on the board and start seeing some price appreciation in the market. So depending on how the investments go, depending on how their markets are, they carve out new pieces of the market, there could be some more growth opportunity here for these stocks that we haven't seen in some time because they've really just kind of been sitting there, right? Cars are expensive, and when you don't sell them, they depreciate and they sit on your books, but there's nothing you can do with them, right? And also the automakers are benefiting from a profit surge as people are going to buy a lot more, as well as taking advantage of dealerships have less vehicles in some ways in their lots because of the delivery shortage. So they're taking advantage of that and saying, all right, if we have a vehicle shortage, we have room in our lots. We have room to make electric vehicles. So instead of replacing them with the cars that are kind of going out of style, we can invest heavily at replacing that space that we need to with more electric vehicles. So they're trying to take advantage of these things across the board to put themselves in a better competitive position and more. So definitely. Some people will definitely argue to use Tesla, use their multiples as kind of a parameter, like a ceiling, right, a range to kind of look for and say what kinds of premiums does Tesla get because this is their industry. Can we expect those premiums to transfer to these other auto companies? And if so, if it's a premium from this position, how high should the stock be? What should justify that price? But again, I think there's other considerations here because these companies do still have a lot of bloated inventory. They do still have lots of dealerships. Tesla doesn't do dealerships, right? A lot of these companies do. A lot of these companies have a lot of inventory sitting around that's being unused and depreciating, maybe not as much as Tesla does. So those are different things to think about. They raise their pre-tax profit, and when companies raise their guidance, it's kind of a sign they're saying, "Hey, we've done the math. We think this is reasonable." So we might already see some prices increasing slowly over time for this, but it really depends on how well you believe it, right? They're saying this through 2025, so we have to see how these investments materialize as well as other macro trends. So there's definitely a lot of forces in the market, but I would say this is definitely a plus. Definitely going to help the stock grow because it's definitely a hit in the right direction of value. The only question is, is it still fairly valued for the stock price right now? This can bake into your estimates and may raise that target price, but you still have to kind of look at, the value underneath as a whole and see, is the target price still, cheap compared to what it is now, or is it, far up in the future? And right now the stock is cheap. So that's definitely paying attention to.
We have a year to date 52%. A 6 month 46%, 1 month 10%.
Right. So you can see on that chart that you were showing before, I mean, lagged on my screen, but chart, you can see that there was in 2020 and they're kind of roaring back, which is, you can see synonymous with a lot of things in the market. You're seeing the growth of people coming out and buying and trying to, fight their way back. But you're also seeing, I think, in that momentum, trades for electric vehicles, trades for this, this new trend, and then trying to price this in. And of course, they've been announcing electric vehicle stuff for a while. Right. So just because there was an announcement today or just because there's news today doesn't necessarily mean the price doesn't have its value already baked in, because people may have already seen the earlier news and said, you know what, I think it deserves to be up here anyway. This may just be a reaffirmation of certain valuations. It could just be evidence for a new one. You've got to kind of look at the future growth of revenue and cost and try to figure out if what the range of values could be. But I think we've been seeing that price kind of get this value being baked into the price over the last couple of months anyway, since they've been announcing these changes. The second major topic here for in EVs is the Alphabet continues to bet big on electric vehicles and autonomous vehicles. Waymo, the Google sibling, right? Because it's Alphabet's child, one of Alphabet's child company, announced a $2.5 billion US dollar investing round for self-driving cars. Company said it's driven tens of millions of miles on public roads across 25 cities in the U.S. so far. They are the leader in autonomy because of just how much experience, how much on road time they've put in and testing these things. They do have autonomous vehicles that are as a ride hailing in Phoenix, and they're also working with a couple companies such as UPS, JB Hunt Transport, and AutoNation on working on getting freight and delivery elements involved in this as well. But it still loses money right now. It's still relying heavily on investors to kind of fund it, so it's not very profitable at the moment. But it's still the leader in terms of how much experience it has. But just like we said, just because you're the leader, just because you have the most, doesn't necessarily mean you'll be the winner in the end. But definitely something to look at because they are investing big. They're getting these funding rounds and they're trying to get this kind of technology commercialized. So definitely, if nothing else, definitely a bump up in the electric vehicle trade and the macro for that entire trade. Yeah. Oh, definitely. We're we're probably decades away from true just autonomous vehicles on the road everywhere. Just in terms of laws and policies and safety measures, we're probably decades away before we're going to see that. Before we see that pretty much standardized. Where you like everyone's got autonomous cars, and that's a staple. I think we're decades away.
I mean, I
There's a lot.
remember visiting Mountain View in California where Google and Facebook and all the tech hubs are. And I remember seeing these autonomous cars with these big hubs on top of the cars. And that was the GPS trying to track and censor what's happening around it. And they're big and clunky and everything. So Tesla changed the game with its sensors and everything that was able to sense all its surroundings. So we'll see how Google does because they've had this for, and by the way, that was over 10 years ago. So they have technology there that they could utilize pretty easily.
Well, yeah, Josh put a picture here. It looks like the top's uh, a little more neat and organized. I don't think it would matter so much for a robo taxi if it didn't look the best because it has to serve its function of getting to and from. I mean, if it was a car you could buy, an autonomous car that you own, I would definitely recommend style would matter. But I imagine that if it's a service, it might not matter as much. You know what I mean? Like we don't really care about how buses and things look when you get on them. So as long as it functions well. But I just think they're a long way off from actually being able to implement this as a standard you see across U.S. cities.
I mean, I remember the last time I read about this, it was the advancement in technology using a solid state matter instead of using a rotating a sensor in order to obtain their data, only for the very matter that the car is moving in. It's obviously going to run into bumps. And so that was the last thing I heard of it. It sounded like pretty cool. It sounded like they were making some big advancements, but it's been, like Jeremy said, 5-10 years since we've been, playing with this technology. I feel like we're leading up to somebody, and wasn't it somewhere in was it China that they are using autonomous vehicles already for their taxi services?
Well, I mean, in Phoenix, Waymo has like a robo taxi ride hailing service as well. They're being tested in places. Like, don't get me wrong, they're definitely finding ways to either pay people or convince them to try these things out and give them test cases. But when we're talking about everybody, we're talking about widespread. Not the issue of necessarily people buying them or them being made. It's the issue of safety, liability, insurance. And also you have autonomous vehicles where there's no driver behind the wheel. You have to update all the laws regarding motor vehicles. The same laws no longer apply. Well, who's liable? What happens if there's an accident? What happens if there's a problem? These things have to be reassessed, and that means we have to go into the world of bureaucracy, and we have to sludge through that friggin' trek, and have them all find a way to make themselves happy and keep everybody in their bases happy and make everybody find a compromise. Meanwhile, main controls so these companies don't get too big because we're seeing a big push against big tech. So the environment is definitely not as accommodating for big new tech changes at the moment.
But
But
it's accommodating in Singapore, where they have their first autonomous taxis. So Singapore is ahead of the game.
They're the ones who have their
yes,
first ones out. Yeah,
Yes, they
I know a
do.
company just went ahead and just took over the market in that area.
right, and also that I think that's the big thing too. Like if you can find a country or groups of people that are on the same page and can get behind ideas and work together as a unit, you would find that a lot more things would work. I think in the United States, it's just we right now are so different and so divided, and we're so behind on so many problems. It's just, you know, it's a very cool idea. We'll get there eventually. No, I don't doubt that. I just don't know if it'll be, in the next decade or two.
Hold on, working together accomplishes things?
That's not capitalism.
No.
Uh,
Well, it
my
is,
mind was
and
just blown away.
if you work together on the same team to beat other teams, technically it would be. But if if you're just all at the same time, you might have those. But that's all. The difference in working together can still exist in capitalistic cities because the market, our entire existence as like a market financial system is the cooperation of all the participants. There's no real like structures keeping it all together. We all will it to stay together by the fact that we trust in the system, we have faith in the system, we use the system, and we don't want to we don't allow the system to be dismantled. That's only because we have faith in it. If we didn't, it wouldn't exist. Laws and rules and everything, we think of them as rigid structures, but they're just enforced. It's all about the psychological mindsets and keeping the things running. Once you lose those elements of it and it starts breaking down, then the structure is meaningless.